Hey folks, welcome back to another video. So the last few days I tried something and I found something and it's probably a game changer. It's hopefully kind of useful to you, I don't know. You can learn something always, right? So before I show you the solution, I want to show you the problem. So here in Bitwig I have some kind of test channel. So we have a test tone here and a spectrum analyzer, and we have here a peak limiter, and we just use here more or less the histogram, the level histogram. So let's say we have here a frequency, I don't know, 40 Hertz, maybe a bass sound. We push up here the gain. So let's say we have the bass at minus 3 dB. Okay. You can see here the level on the histogram, and you can also see the level here on the spectrum analyzer. So let's change the frequency on that. Let's say we have, instead of 40 Hertz, we have maybe 4 kilohertz. Now you can see here the level is way up there, but here the level stays the same. Okay, so maybe go back. You can see 40 Hertz, slower in level, but the level stays the same. We go up, level is higher here on the spectrum analyzer, but here it stays the same. So the reason for that is, of course, pretty obvious. The spectrum analyzer here has a tilt setting. So the tilt is here on 3 dB per octave, which means the slope or the visuals, only the visuals go down here or are pushed down, because that's how we perceive audio or frequencies. Our ears are just more sensible to upper frequencies around 1K than lower frequencies. So we just change the visuals on the spectrum analyzer so they match more like how we hear music or how we hear audio signals. But the histogram here doesn't. It's always shows you the exactly technical loudness. So when we switch the spectrum analyzer here to, let's say, 0 dB per octave, which is, by the way, white noise. So when we switch this here to white noise, you can see it's a flat line. So with white noise, we can change here the frequency to 40 Hertz, and it stays the same here on this visualizer, of course. It also stays the same here. So what this means is the peak limiter actually shows you white noise or white noise tilted. It's not tilted. It's technically the same loudness for each frequency. That's how you see it in here. And it's pretty fine. It's pretty normal, and it's very useful. So with the spectrum analyzer, we use the tilt setting to actually make more sense, or to make more based decisions for how to treat different frequencies with an EQ. So here, let's switch this back to 3 dB per octave. So usually for my drum bass stuff, I use what's it called? Multiband limiters, multiband compressors, and so on. And that's because of that, right? So we use here maybe an FX3 splitter, and then we put a limiter in each of these bands, and then we use different settings for the gain or for the threshold to actually counter that we have lower frequencies in the top end than in the low end, because that's how we hear music, right? So that's why we use basically multiband compression. So we can compress different bands differently and act on different frequencies differently. That's why we have this. But my idea was, can we actually use one full range limiter and make something like a multiband limiter out of this without using band splitting? And the answer is, yeah, you kind of do this. And my idea for this was to use something that's called pre-emphasis and de-emphasis. And that's used in all kinds of different audio situations, but it's not used in, at least I haven't seen it in limiting and compression. In compression is probably used a lot. So let's do this here. So we use a chain device, and we put here the limiter in there. And in front of this, we use a tilt EQ, right? Also after the limiter, we use a tilt EQ. And you can probably already guess where this is going. So we use here pre-emphasis and de-emphasis. Use the same values here, plus 24, minus 24 dB. So now when we change here the gain, you can see this here, and when we change the frequency, it stays the same because it's kind of white noise. It's the same, technically the same loudness for all the frequencies. But what I want to do is I want to emphasize, or I want to react to lower sounds, maybe faster or slower. So what I can do now is I can say tilt the spectrum here, get the lows out of the limiter, and push up the top end a bit higher. So now I have a different balance here. Let's change it. Let's go to this frequency, gain. So when we change now here the frequency, you can see the level goes down because we go down in frequency, and this tilt kind of pushes here the frequencies lower in volume down here. And then after that, we counter basically this EQ. So we go with this frequency curve into the peak limiter, we limit then the audio signal, and then we correct it back to the original balance. So this is called pre-emphasis and de-emphasis. And it's maybe interesting if you want to just compress the low end. So usually when you have a track, you push the limiter to this track, and all the bass sounds, the kick drum and so on, you catch basically early on here with your threshold, because this is what the loudest signal is. But sometimes you don't want to have this. You want to just, compress the hi-hats or so on. So you do this, you push the hi-hats up, right, into the limiter, and then you push the hi-hats back down where they are before that. So with this, you have kind of a multi-band limiter, or it behaves in kind of the same way. So the funny thing is, you not only can do this with a limiter, you can also do this with a compressor, right? And here it's, we can do this here with Compressor Plus. So in Compressor Plus, we can use the sidechain FX, so you can use a tilt EQ in here if you want to. And I guess some people already do this. You can also use an EQ in here and say, get rid of all the bass sounds for the analyzing part here of the compressor. So the kick drum and the bass sound doesn't, make the sound pumping in a way. So you get the kick drum and the bass out of here. So this is also something you can do in the Compressor Plus. I think that the Dynamics device also does this. There's also here, there's a sidechain FX, so you can also put here EQs in there, tilt EQ. But there are also some devices where you don't have this. So you can say you have here a distortion device. Something like this is a full band distortion here. So there's here some kind of band pass in there. We can also use this with the filter plus, for instance, here with the transfer curve, right? So you can say compress or kind of saturate overtones or the top end more than the low end. It's possible with this, but that's not actually what I want to show you. I just want to show you what you can do just with this pre-emphasis and de-emphasis. What I want to do, let's delete all of this here. What I wanted to do is I want to mix down a track with some kind of normalization, but the normalization analyzing signal is tilted, which gives me in the end, so this was my thought process, was then better balanced. So let's say we have here this track, and this track is not mixed down at all. And we put here, let's say, a spectrum analyzer on this. So we have some kind of frequency distribution here, which is probably fine for a track, I don't know. So my idea was, can I actually just twist one button and change all of these tracks in loudness just with volume? No EQing, nothing, just loudness. Can I change the volume of these tracks so that the top end is lower or the low end is higher, or the other way around? So I can change basically the distribution without using an EQ. And it turns out you can. And this maybe is just an interesting idea. Maybe someone wants to put this in a plugin. So let's go here to pads. Let's put this out here. Can I push this? Yeah. So let's try this out. So we have here music, we have here an ARP. So my idea was, let's use actually my auto level, this one here, which changes the volume. It kind of takes here a threshold, and everything that's above the threshold gets pushed up to 0 dB. You can see there's a change in volume. We also have an amount knob here, so we can say this is the original loudness, and this is my changed loudness. So we can morph between original volume and my adjusted volume. So when we go in here, we more or less use an envelope follower on the full range signal. So what if we actually tilt this signal? Is this possible? And the answer is yes, this is possible. So my idea for this was to go into the pre-FX box here of this auto leveler, and I use a tilt EQ like this, and I put this into an FX layer here and use the second tool device. And we mute the tilt output here. We just mute the output. So everything that goes into here, maybe let's loop this here for a moment, will be tilted. And in here we use a sidechain input, and we grab the signal coming here from the tilted signal. So all music ARP, auto level chains pre-FX, tilt, maybe tilt out. Okay, so now we can use this here in front, so we can tilt the signal, and the tilted signal goes into this sidechain input, but it doesn't go into the auto level thing here with this input, right? So we have two inputs now. So this is our sidechain input. And for the sidechain input, we go basically here into the analyzing part. So the audio signal is untouched. We only change the volume on this. But the tilt EQ changes the analyzing signal, and we go into the sidechain input here, and then we analyze the loudness of this, and then we change the volume of the original signal. That's the idea. Okay, so let's try this out here. Make this a bit louder first, foremost. So with this tilt setting, we can now change how the envelope follower receives audio, and then it makes decisions on that. And it turns out it works actually really well if you do this on all channels. So what I want to do now, so I want to use here the project thing, and I just create some macros, and I say this is maybe the rise time. This is maybe the fall time. Then we want to use maybe the amount, so we can see or can hear how it sounds before and after. Then we of course want to change the tilt setting. What's this? 24 dB. Maybe we want to change also the gain, the overall gain of this. Let's go to 1 here. That's okay. Yeah, that's gain. That's okay. Something else, maybe the threshold. threshold. Okay. So now all we have to do is to just copy this to all other tracks. So let's put this here. Pads. Also here percussions, kick drum, and maybe the bass. And maybe put this also here on the music bus. So now let's look at the frequency spectrum here, and let's change here the, this is actually this, gain. I think this is the tilt setting, right? Forgot to change the name here. Yeah, this is the tilt. Can you hear the difference? Now we have lower lows and more highs. And it's not EQing, it's just changing the volume on each of these tracks based on the tilted signal. And this works the more or the better you have frequency. Well, let's say you have on different channels, you have more like singled out frequencies, of course. If you have like channels with full distribution of all frequencies, so bass and top end, of course it doesn't work that well. But you know, if you have like on each track bass, then you have a top bass layer, then you have hi-hats and so on. It works pretty well actually. We can also change the fall time, which is more like a compressor actually. And then here the gain setting is actually not the gain for the master, it's changing the gain on each of these tracks individually. You can see here all the volumes are down. And then all you have to do is you watch the spectrum analyzer and, you know, change the tilt here, and without EQing you can balance the tonal, the tonal balance of the whole mixdown. It's basically a mixdown helper, kind of. Of course, for a good mixdown you have to go in here and say, oh, I want to have the melody actually a bit louder, or I want to have this FX sound a bit quieter and so on. So you have to make some specific decisions here and there, but it gives you a nice balanced mixdown, in my opinion, just with this tool. The drawback of this always is that my auto level actually doesn't save the calculated values. So if you want to go here to export and bounce the audio, you have some volume changes in the beginning because no values are persisted, and it has to recalculate all the values here when the tracks or when the instruments begin to play. This is a bit of a downer. But I'm working on that. Maybe I find a solution. In my opinion, so far, it's pretty fun to use. So this is what I want to show you. I haven't seen anyone doing this so far. Maybe it's a completely stupid idea, but it gives you so much power here with the project remotes or project modulators to actually change the compression on all tracks at the same time. Tilt the spectrum and change the loudness. Maybe you can also add here some distortion to it, right? And you can distort on each track differently. Anyway, I'm talking out of my ass here. That's basically it. I want to show you this. Maybe I put this tilt thing on this auto level and put the preset up, but you could see it's not very complicated. You can do this with all kinds of audio effects, not only the auto leveler, not only the peak limiter. You can do this also for reverb. So you can take out the bass in front of the reverb, then you go through the reverb, and after the reverb you put the bass back in. I don't know, maybe it's useful. I kind of found it interesting, and I probably want to use it. It's a game changer. Anyway, thanks for watching. Leave a like, leave a subscription. See you in the next video. Bye.